We'll do a review on Likutei Sichos in chelek Chav Daled in volume 24. This is the Sicha for Chai Elul for the 18th day of Elul. The 18th day of Elul is the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. And the Rebbe makes note of the fact that we say Gut Yontiv on Chai Elul. Usually, the whole idea of a birthday and to say Good Yom Tov, that seems a little bit new. But the Rebbe says that this is actually one of the ideas that we can connect with the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, that the whole idea of birthday, is the idea of Chassidus, both side the Chassidus Haklolis from the Baal Shem Tov, and specifically with the Chassidus of Chabad of the Alter Rebbe. And then the Rebbe goes away and also explains that the Torah that we had in association with Chai Elul and the Baal Shem Tov, and V'hoyu Kisove La'oretz, as the Rebbe will detail, also how that connects to the theme of Chai Elul, the idea of birth, while the baby is in the womb, but it's still not an entity by itself. Birth makes it into an entity on its own, as the Rebbe will articulate. But before the Rebbe gives the Sikha, they added over here as an introduction, as it says, B'toir ha'gedama to Abola Kamon. This is an introduction to that comes later on. The Rebbe doesn't want people to lose focus on the main thing of what Chai Elul is, notwithstanding the fact that the Rebbe brings out a very specific, detailed lesson from Chai Elul as it relates to the idea of birthday. But the Rebbe says we can't forget about the main idea of Chai Elul. Chai Elul brings in an energy into all the avodah of Elul. Elul is the avodah ani l'doidi v'doidi li, and as it is manifest in the various different avodah of Torah, avodah, gemilus chasodim, which all have the words of Rosh Tevis of Elul, and then also the level of Teshuvah, as the Rebbe details, and therefore that's the point to remember. And then we learn the Sikha. So we're going to first do the Hagdama. So the Rebbe says like this: Muvanu Poshut, it's understood and it's obvious. As Berevo Inyonim Kikulam in most matters, whenever we talk about anything, is the Klolusa Inyan, there is the general theme, the idea in general. Und sein Teuchen und Nekuda Pnimi is what it is the content, what is the inner point of this matter. And then you have Hosaina Protim Upirte Protim. Then you have the details and the details of the details. Basically, you have the general theme in our case, in Chai Elul, Ubim Yuchad especially, in Azah Inyan Ikri v'Chai Elul. So in such a major, important matter as the 18th of Elul, we have the general idea, and then we have details of what comes out of it. And the Rebbe says to begin with L'chol Reish, and to start with, because while we're going to be talking about a very specific detail of Chai Elul, the Rebbe wants to say by reflecting on a detail, we also can come to the general idea, the close, the main part of what Chai Elul is. Even when we reflect on one detail, so at least it reminds us. So while we may be talking about a detail, this brings about reminds us about, maybe we're not discussing the general theme, but this detail that we're discussing reminds us about the content and the inner point bis zu bringen das in Abachenu b'maisa. So this will bring down in a result, in action. So when we are going to reflect on a detail of Chai Elul, but this should bring down in practical in action what the main point of Chai Elul is. Was Hamaisa hu ha'ikar, the main thing is action. So azoi oich be'inyan Chai Elul. Same thing is when we discuss Chai Elul. Was lekamon later on in Sif Hey in the Sicha. There is a discussion, a give and take in the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, welche is gesagt geworden in einem von the Chai Eluls, which was said in one of the 18th of Elul. And the Rebbe is going to have a discussion over there later on in the Sifhei to understand exactly what is the meaning over there and the connection between the different parts in this saying. So there's a whole discussion over there. So the Rebbe says this discussion has to follow after first getting the main point of Chai Elul as it has applicable into action into Maisa B'Poyel, and that comes like a before you get involved in the very specific. Is das la'achar v'yosim l'neged enov v'yizboinen. After you put it in front of your eyes and you reflect in the nekuda hapnimis shabazeh, in the inner point of Chayel and this, this is expressed in the name with which you call it. You call it Chai Elul. That's the name, Chai Elul. So what did the Friedrich Rebbe, Veloshin Harav Nesidarenu, using the language of the Rav, the leader of our generation, Chak Merichom Admur, my father-in-law, the Rebbe in Likutei Deburim. So he says about Chai Elul, Aleph, he says, first of all, that Chai Elul is der Tag, was hat gebracht und bringt a Leben in Elul. Chai Elul is the day that brought and continues to bring life into Elul. Chayis, Chai Elul, it brings life into Elul. And number two expression was that Chai Elul git a Chayis, that Chai Elul gives a passion, a energizes in the avodah von Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li, in the service of Elul, which is Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. So this is the main theme of Chai Elul, to bring life and to vitalize the avodah of Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. Now, Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li is a general theme of I turn to my beloved, and then my beloved is Doidi Li, turns to me. That's a very general theme. So the Rebbe says that this general theme that the Chayis of Elul gives in the avodah of Ani L'Doidi, in a general way, it also comes down in all the details of Torah, Avodah, and Gemilus Chasodim, which are all hinted in abbreviations in the word of Elul, so that the energy that Chai Elul gives is more than just the general, but also in the specific. So we can add, possibly, the Rebbe says, as the Avodah Klolis Fun Ani L'Doidi, the general service of I unto my beloved, welche bringt dem Klolus Einyan von Doidi Li, which brings the general, my beloved, to me, I'm to my beloved. So that's a very general way. Tells sich in the Protim that later on gets divided up in the details, welche seinen euch merumes broschen tables von Elul, which are also hinted in the beginning of the words of Elul. And the Rebbe is going to bring down first about Torah, because Elul is Rosh Tevis in Eliyode V'samti Loch. It happened to your hand, I'll place for you. So even though this is a pasuk which talks about literally about Orei Miklot, cities of refuge, but really this has a reference to Torah as well, because Torah is also considered a place, something of refuge. Inyan Orei Miklot. This is the idea of Orei Miklot in Eliot Samtilach in the pasuk. Ha'adam, and then in the service of man, Zehu Kav HaTorah. This is the line of Torah, Kidivre Torah Kotenheim, because the words of Torah absorb, they provide refuge. So therefore, the Elul that is hinted in the Lo Yode V'Samti Loch in Zare Miklot is a hint for Torah to give, and this is one of the details to energize the avodah within Torah. Then we have the avodah of tefillah, that Elul is Rosh Tevis Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. That's the generally the service of turning to Hashem, and then Hashem turns to us. This is the Kava Avodah, the general theme line of service Yat Tefillah. Ubefrat, that is tefillah. So in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, we had the avodah korbanis also, but at tefillah, but they had korbanis. Ubefrat b'yomeinu elu, but especially during our days, presently, she'ein lanu ella avodah shebelev zu tefillah. All what we have is the service of the heart, which is tefillah. We don't have any more korbanis. She'toifel Umechaberes Yisrael. Teufel means that ties and connects and brings together the Yidden, the Tefillah, Lavim Shabashamayim, to their Father in heaven. So that's the level of Tefillah, which is in the Rosh Tevis, Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. And then we also have in the line of Kimilus Chasodim that Elul is Rosh Tevis, Ish L'Rei Eyu Matones L'Rev Yonim, the pasuk of in the Megillah, that the man to his friend and gifts to the poor, which is also Elul, which is also Kav, the line of the Gemilos Chasodim. Ubetoir Hagadomas v'Yisoid l'chol Kavin Elul, and as an introduction and as a basis to all these three lines of Torah, Avodah, Gemilos Chasodim, we also have the line of Teshuvah. We have the idea of Teshuvah, that Elul is Rosh Tevis, Umol Hashem Elikecha, Es levavcha ve'es levav, that's Elul, es levav levav, zarecha. Hashem will circumcise, meaning to open up your heart to return to Hashem. That means the spiritual idea of circumcision of the heart, which is the Inyan HaTshuva. The Rebbe basically wants to bring out, not to lose focus on what the real avodah of Chei Elul is, that as brought down by the Friedrich Rebbe. So notwithstanding that we're going to have a discussion, but that remains still the main focus. Now we're doing the Sikha itself, Chei Elul. Aleph. Chei Elul, the Rebbe said, is der Yom HaYoledes von the Shnei HaMoedes HaGedolim. That's the birthday of the two great luminaries. The Rebbe is paraphrasing as it's been brought down from before, that the two great luminaries, we talk about the sun and the moon in the Torah, is a reference to the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. Those are two luminaries. And that was the Baal Shem Tov was Montik Chei Elul Tov Nun Ches. It was Monday, the 18th of Elul, in the year Tov Nun Ches Nachas, is der Yom HaYoledes von dem Baal Shem Tov. That's the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov. Mittwoch, and Wednesday, Chei Elul Tov Kuf Hei, 18th of Elul Tov Kuf Hei, is der Yom HaYoledes von Rabbeinu Hazokin, is the birthday on Wednesday, Chei Elul Kahos Tov Kuf Hei, is the birthday of the Alter Rebbe. So first, the Rebbe wants to address what's a big deal about a birthday. A birthday doesn't, the Rebbe says, yes, a birthday is meaningful, but yet to the extent of making it a yontif, that was in association with the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. That inyan, this idea, as in Yom Hoiledes from a tzaddik, that when there is a birthday of a tzaddik, is azman simcha, it's a time of joy. State become a mekoymes bechazal. This is already stated in many places in our sages, in the our sages of blessed memory. Befrat legabe Yitzchak Avinu, especially with regards to Yitzchak Avinu, the pasuk says that he made a party in Mishta God b'yom uledes as Yitzchak benoi. Moshe Rabbeinu also, we find that when he was born, Kitov, that he was in a very good way, and the day of their birthday is considered to be protective, as the Rebbe will bring down the great joy that we have in this birthday. The birthday of Yitzchak, as the Rebbe will bring, and both the birthday of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the birthday of Yitzchak had an impact, the fact that it's a day of joy, that it moved things around when we set up the Chanukah Mishkan, that it should coincide with the birth of Yitzchak. That's how important the joy, the simcha of Yitzchak, because Hashem wanted the two simchas to be together. Via state in Medrash, as it says in the Medrash, this is first with regards to Yitzchak, as der Tam was mehot dem Mishkan aufgestellt später. Why was the Mishkan raised later on, not immediately when it was finished? Und nicht gleich nachdem ist fertig geworden, not just immediately after it was ready. Mipnei shechoshav HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'arev, Hashem wanted to mix Simchas HaMishkan b'Simchas HaYom shenoled by Yitzchak Avinu, to mix the joy of the Mishkan with the joy of the day that Yitzchak Avinu was born. Lefi shebe'echad b'Nisan noiled Yitzchak. Yitzchak was born on the first day of Nisan, and that's when the Eibishter made the simcha of the Chanukas HaMizbeach, the Simchas HaMishkan. Simchas HaMishkan. The Eibishter said, Hareini ma'arif simchaschem, I'm going to mix and combine the joy, simcha besimcha, joy with a joy. So we see clearly that with regards to Yitzchak's birth, there is a simcha there. So this is with regards to Yitzchak. Nochmer, megefint as der yom, not only is it joy by Moshe Rabbeinu, we find that it actually brought salvation. His birthday, the day of birth, brought a salvation and saved the Jewish people from the decree of Haman. Nochmer, megefint, we find as the Yom Hailedes from Moshe Rabbeinu, Zayin Adar, the birthday of Moshe Rabbeinu, the 7th of Adar, had gepoiled dem Bittel Geseiras Haman. This impacted to nullify the decree of Haman. Was is ausgefallen auf Chodesh Adar. It turned out that the lottery came on the month of Adar, and the Gemara says, "V'lo yedeya shebeshiva ba'adar meisu beshiva ba'adar noiled." He, Haman, did not know, who was trying to find an good time to make his decree against the Yidden. He didn't realize that he thought that Adar was a good time because Moshe Rabbeinu died. But what he didn't know, that actually he died then, but the Beshiva Ba'adar Noilad, that he was actually born on the second day of Adar. So therefore, the day that he was born protected them and they were saved. But notwithstanding that we find these areas of joy with regards to Yitzchak, with regards to Moshe, Afal became gefindt man it, but still we don't find as the Yom Haledes soll werden a Yom Tov v'Yom Simcha begilu bepirsum, that the birthday should become a day, a holiday, and a day of joy openly and public in a public way. In anhoge b'maise b'poel l'chol Yisrael, in a actual conduct for all Jews, we don't find this. And on the contrary, the Rebbe brings down Benegel Zayin Oder is Api Shulchan Aruch, and as far as the 7th of Oder, according to Shulchan Aruch, Zayin Oder Ayim Tainis, it's actually a fast day. Mitzat Shemez Moshe, because Moshe died there, so it is a fast day actually. So it's not a joyous celebration. However, Benegei aber dem Yom Holedes from Baal Shem Tov on the mountain Rebbe Chei Elul, as it relates to the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe on the 18th of Elul, is Nisalig and Nisgalig geworden al Yidei Nisiderenu. It is revealed through the leader of our generation, B'Shem Aviv Chak Admur Marshab Nishmos Eden. The name of his father, the Rebbe Rashab, Ados is a Yom Simcha, that this is a day of joy. Biz Ba'amiras Good Yontif, to the extent that you actually say Good Yontif. That's what the previous Rebbe revealed from his father, the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe, der Shver, so this was hidden, but the father told, the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe. But then the Frierdiker Rebbe went and revealed it to all. And the Rebbe, der Shver, my father-in-law, the Rebbe, Adam Yom Tov Megala given to alle Yidden, he revealed this holiday to all Yidden. So, because it is, everything is precise, and the birthday became known by the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, we have to say that there is a connection between the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov with birthdays. So, bald as Ali Yonim, verbunden mit Teure seine Bediuk, since all matters that are tied to Torah are precise. Is move on, it's understood as the Simcha ve'ilu from the Yom Haledes b'Chai Elul, that the joy and the greatness of the birth of Chai Elul is nit nor val durch dem Baal Shem Tov und Alten Rebbe. It's not just because through the Baal Shem Tov and the Alten Rebbe hat sich aufgetan a Nair Gilu in Torah Vedus Hashem, that there became about a novel, new revelation in Torah and service of Hashem, which is the two, the Gilui from Torah Chasidus HaKlolis, the revelation of general Chasidus, which is from the Baal Shem Tov, the Torah's Chasidus Chabad, and the teaching of Chabad Chasidus from the Alter Rebbe to Klal Yisrael. Besides the fact, the general greatness that came through these two great luminaries, nar euch val der chidush inyan hasimcha b'yom holedes, this novel idea of to rejoice on a birthday is verbunden b'miyuchad mit Baal Shem Tov and the Mountain Rebbe. This has a special connection to birthdays. That this is that we came up with the idea that joy on a birthday is tied specifically by Hashem Tov and Alter Rebbe on Torah Chasidus and his Galso Yodom, and the teaching of Chasidus that was revealed to them, that is associated with a birthday. And the Rebbe says not only as separate birthdays, but it's the combination of both birthdays together. The way this day is presented, not it was the Alter Rebbe's and it was the Baal Shem Tov, but it was both of ours together. Nochmed. The Sheiches is zu ze beide zusammen. The connection is to them both together. As the language of the Rebbe Rashab and the Murshos about Chai Elul. Heint is der Yom Holedes. Today is the birthday von unsere Shnei Hamoides HaGedolim, for our two luminaries. He combined them together. It's the birthday of our two luminaries. This haste. as the nekudas ha'inyan von odem yom haledes, that the point of the idea that we want to say about what is this birthday, drückt sich ois, it expresses itself durch beide ma'odes ha'gedolim zusammen, the two luminaries together. We need to find something which the two luminaries as together, their birthdays, the Baal Shem Tov and Rabbeinu Hazok and the Baal Shem Tov Alter Rebbe, how their birthdays impacted the idea that it makes it a day of joy, the day of their birthday, because it was the birthday of the Shnei Ha'Ma'oros, which is associated with the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov, as both of them reveal together the Chassidus and Chassidus Aklolus and Chassidus Chabad Beprotis. So now the Rebbe is going to explain by first asking, why should we celebrate a birthday? It seems like the birth coming from the mother's womb, in a way, is going to a lower level, on a spiritual level, during the time that the baby is in the mother's womb. It learns all of the Torah. Before it comes out, it forgets. Why are we celebrating? We're celebrating the independence of a new creation, new life base. But man das verstehen behagdim habir bepashtus, to understand, we'll understand this by introducing the simple explanation in vos as bastei de simcha b'yom hoiledes. What is the joy consist of on a birthday? Eider der Kind werd geboren, before the child is born. When gefindt sich noch bimei imoi, when he's still in his mother's womb. Hat alle evorim. He has all limbs. Bis euch seides v'tzipernayim, also hairs and nails. Noch mehr. Not only does he have all of these limbs and the hair, by him is euch farant nuasevorim. Also the limbs move. Oichel, he eats mimashim oichelas, what his mother eats. Vishoisa, and he drinks mimashim mishoisa, what his mother drinks. As we weiter, and so on. So he is the baby, technically the fetus has everything, all the limbs, and actually there's movement. V'adrab. And the contrary. B'shas et is b'mei imoi, when the baby is in mother's womb, in a way it's protected, is shielded from a lot of things that you need to protect him when he's outside. Is that in gewisse Sachen, in various matters, starker vil achrish noilad. He's stronger than after he's given birth, than he was born. In the mother's womb is a shamur. He is protected from inyone hazekulu, from matters that can do damage. Automatically through his mother's womb, he's protected there. As opposed to when he's born. Then you need verschiedene Hishtadlus and various efforts with tircha and troubles, as soll sein body v'sholim, that he should be healthy and whole. Now, as we said earlier, Eichel machilas imay, he eats from where his mother eats, b'derech memela, that's automatic. Well, derech zeh b'negeir shesiyah, the same thing is the drinking. Mashenkin lachrei shenoiled, as opposed to after the fetus is born, is those verbunden mit tircha, that's associated with trouble. To feed the child, come upon him, mitzar for them tineg v'chulu, and many times it's also associated with pain for the baby, etc. So that's physically, the change seems to be that he became more vulnerable once he is out in the world. Balachas kama v'kama b'negei l'ruchnis, and certainly how much more so on the spiritual side. Ba'ayid, when we talk about a yid and the birth of a yid, that tinuk b'mei imoi, when the baby is in his mother's womb, is neir doluk al reishay. There is a candle lit on top of his head. V'tzeifa umabit m'seifa olam v'atzeifa. He can look and see from one end of the world to the other end of the world. And further, this is all quoting from the Gemara. We also teach him the entire Torah. So that's before. Once he comes into the world, to the air of the world, outside of the mother's womb, a malach comes, smacks him on his lips, on his mouth, and he has him forget, it makes him forget the entire Torah. Und der noch is, und der noch, and then later on, so first he knew over all the Torah, now he forgets everything. Und der noch, und erst later on, after he starts to speak, he's Avi Malamde Torah Tziva. Then he starts teaching him Torah Tziva Lanu, on the verse of Torah Tziva on Speter. Ben Chomesh LeMikra, 5 years you learn Chomesh, Ben Esel LeMishnah, 10 you learn Mishnah Chulu. These can Tzukum and to their Shleimus Limud HaTorah until he can reach the highest level of the study of Torah from Ben Arboim Libina, of 40 years to come to understanding. Only a minority gets to the level of learning all the Torah. So the baby in the fetus learned all of the Torah. And then in order, when he's born, he forgets it, all the malach smacks him in his mouth and he forgets all the Torah. And then you have to go and start over again, and you slowly, and it's just very unusual for somebody to learn the whole Torah that he knew before. So if we consider that, is doch der Yom HaLedes a gewaltige Yerida. So the birthday seems to be a tremendous descent. L'gabe the matzah vi is als uber b'mei imoi, relative, comparing this to the condition, the way he was a fetus in his mother's womb. So what is the simcha for Yom HaLedes? So why is there a joy by Yom HaLedes? And the Rebbe will explain this, the difference between a fetus and a born. When the fetus is in the mother's womb, it's not independent life. And that's why if the mother's life is in danger, you can harm the baby, because the baby does not have yet his own life. But after the baby is born, he's an independent life. And therefore you cannot save the mother by the life of the baby. And that shows you what happens with birth. Is the beer in them. Move on, it's understood. The chiluk, from the chiluk, I explained the difference between an uber, between a fetus, and a neulad in halacha. The way halacha looks between the difference between a fetus and one who was born. Ubelashoin Rashi, to use Rashi's language, that calls man shelo yotzu la'avir ha'elam, for as long as the baby did not yet go out into the ear of the world, lav nefeshu is not considered to be a soul. V'niten lahorgoi ulahatzil, and he's given, you can kill him to protect his mother and protect the mother. Hamakasha leila dumsukenis, if the mother cannot give birth and she's in danger of losing her life, so you can go ahead and kill the baby to save the mother. And it's specifically when his head comes out, that's when he's called the soul. And that's why you can't touch him to kill him. The Havale Kiyolu, that at that point he's like born. We cannot push away one soul for the other soul, so we cannot do anything to the baby the minute it puts out his head, it becomes an independent soul. Das heißt, what does this tell us? Although the fetus has all the 248 limbs and he moves, he's lav nefeshu, he's still not a soul. Well, the gather von a lebendige nefesh is, what is the definition of a living soul? Is as seine nicht kein zwei besondere Sachen. That a living soul means that there is not two separate items here. A metzias funaguf, you have an entity existent, there's a body, was based that too in him gefindt sich a nefesh, there is a soul in him. Und Chei is a nefesh, that he has a body that has a soul or has the vitality of the soul. As a object which is in a vessel. So you have a soul, and we stick the soul into the body, or the chayis of the nefesh into the body. No, that's not really what the definition of a living. Nor dosis ein lebedike metzias. This is one entity alive. Mas ein kenan uber, but as opposed to a fetus, is sein nefesh chayis nicht sein designer. His life force is not the fetuses, nor shalime, that's the mothers. Und darüber wird nicht angerufen nefesh. He is not a soul. Lav nefesh, he's not a soul because it's not his soul. It's like a life in a vessel, like an object in a vessel, but it's not his life. Und das ist the simcha b'yom ha'ledes b'chol shana v'shana. This is the joy on the birthday and every year and year. But das ist der Tag, because that's the day when is geworden a Selbstständigkeit, that he became an independent, lebendige Metzias. He became a living existence, nefesh. He became his own, he became a soul, a living thing, because we have his own nefesh. Now in Nois Gimel, the Rebbe will explain that this is what has been revealed through the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, that like a birthday, the Alter Rebbe Chassidus is the preparation for Mashiach. And Mashiach will come is compared to birth. The exile is considered like a pregnancy, like a fetus, and the Geula is considered like birth. And the Chiddush, the Rebbe says that the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov brought in is the connection for a Yid with Torah, that it's not like the womb, the mother's womb, the baby, the fetus in the mother's womb, where his body and his life are separated, not his, because you can learn Torah, but doesn't become yours. The Baal Shem Tov revealed a Noid Milvade with the Alter Rebbe that it becomes one. Let's look inside. Al Pizeh Gimel, Al Pizeh move on. Based on this understanding of what birth is, will understand was that Inyan from Yom Haledes al Yom Tov, that the idea of a birthday as a Yom Tov is mudgish, is emphasized by the Baal Shem Tov and the Alten Rebbe, by the Baal Shem Tov Alter Rebbe. Weil das ist the Nekudas HaChidush von Toras HaChasidus. This is the point, the novel idea of the teaching of Chasidus, which both Chasidus HaKlolis from Baal Shem Tov, the general Chasidus of the Baal Shem Tov, zusammen mit Chasidus Chabad, together with Chabad Chasidus, was is Nizgali geworden now, the Rabbeinu Azok, and that was revealed through the Alter Rebbe. Says Yedua, it's known as Golus is Nimshal Li'ibur, that the exile is equated to a pregnancy. It's in the Navi in Yecheskel. And the redemption of the days of Mashiach quickly nowadays, Nimshal Leida is compared to birth. Bald as Teres HaChasidus, while the teaching of Hasidus is sort of a preview or a preparation for Mashiach, because through Hasidus, Mashiach comes, we have Futsu, it has in it some of the novelty that will take place in the future, which in the Geula, which will be the birth. And that starts with the teaching of the Alter Rebbe still while we have not yet reached the Geula, but it's Me'ain. V'bal das Teiras HaChasidus is. Since the Hasidic teaching is Toyamel Chaim Zocha, we say with regards to tasting the food before Shabbos, that those who taste merit life, they taste for the food of Shabbos. So we're tasting of the food of La'asid Lavoi from their Geula. We're talking about the of redemption. So the Teiras HaChasidus is Hachone v'Hagdoma to their Geula. It's a preparation and an introduction to the exile. That's what the Chassidus that has been revealed from the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. Und durch Yafutzu meine Sache Chutza, if we spread the wellsprings to the outside, that Afotzas HaChassidus Chutza, to spread the Chassidus outside, is Osimar the Malkum Meshicha, then as Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, that is when he's going to come. The Mashiach had answered the Baal Shem Tov, as Mashiach answered the Baal Shem Tov, he asked him, "Hey, Mosai Osimar." So he said, when the wellsprings, your wellspring, the Hasidus teaching will spread out, is move on. It's understood as Chidush Teres HaChasidus. The novelty of the Hasidic teaching is Me'ein dem Gilu Shebizman HaGeula, that it's similar to the revelation which is in the time of redemption, Inyan Aleida, which is birth. So La'asid Lave will be birth. Teaching of Hasidus is a connection, it's Me'ain of birth, because Chassidus teaching is what leads to the Geula and Toyamel Chaim Zoch. What does it mean, birth, in the teaching of Chassidus that the Alter Rebbe presented? So the Rebbe says, Kiyum HaTorah mitzvahs can zayin of tzvei ifanim. There's two ways we can fulfill the mitzvahs. Number one, Aleph, the limud HaTorah v'kiyum HaMitzvahs is an eifun. We study Torah, we do mitzvahs in such a way as that Yid and the Torah mitzvahs are tzvei zachen. The Yid and the Torah mitzvah are two separate matters. Is a frumer Yid. He's a religious Jew. He's a rangiton in limud Torah. He is invested in the study of Torah. Und is medagdig be mitzvah kalabika b'chamura. He is particularly doing a small light mitzvah just like a serious mitzvah. So meaning he's perfect. He does everything. He's a religious, he studies, he's devoted to Torah, he takes care of the mitzvahs. However, at his ober margish as is do an however, he senses there is he. Ametzias b'fnei atzmei from Torah mitzvah. There is a separate entity, the independent entity outside. It's not all about Torah mitzvahs. He is also an entity. Lernen Torah. He is the one that is starting to umekayim mitzvahs and observes mitzvahs. These as a zayin mamshich in chayim. They do bring down life into him because he is learning the Torah, and the Torah brings life to him. They werden chayenu v'oirech yameinu. They become his life, the length of his days. They are his life. Weil sie seinen Chochmose Rizone von dem obersten Mokor HaChaim. They are the will and the wisdom and the will of Hashem, which is the source of life, connects with that, so he gets that energy. However, das is me'ein fun ibur. It's still that relationship with Torah and mitzvahs is similar to an ibur. Atinuk b'me'ei imay, like a baby in the mother's womb. Was that uber atzmai, because the fetus himself, chocher hot ale vorim v'chulu, although he has all limbs, sizdo al lebedike metzias, there is a living entity, is aber der chayes, der leben, but the life force, the life needs seiner, nor shalima, it's not his, it's the mother's. Seine evorim atzmon heim kemesim, his own limbs are like that, they're his, they're not alive, it's somebody else's life that vitalizes the fetus, but not the fetus on his own. That would be the ordinary way to learn Torah connect with mitzvahs, not the way if the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov. But then we have Beis, the Baal Shem Tov, hat Megale Madgish given, dem Pnimius Vamitius Inyan von Ein Eid Milvade. The Baal Shem Tov revealed and emphasized the inner and true idea, what it means, Ein Eid Milvade. What did the Baal Shem Tov say? There's nothing besides Hashem. What does it mean? As is nitoke mitzias zelosis baruch. There is no entity, no existence outside of Him, blessed. And therefore, seinen nitot zwei Sachen. There is no two items. Ametzias der Mensch is to say that there is an entity which is the person. Welcher is mekayim ter mitzvah, who does ter mitzvahs. Warum es is nito ametzias oisav dem Ebershter, because there is no existence outside from Hashem. Nor es is faran nor ein zach. There's only one thing. Der Ebershter Torah mitzvah. Hashem is Torah mitzvahs. Shehu v'chachmosu ritzoynei echad. He and his wisdom and his will is one. Ubemela is do ein mitzias, and therefore there's only one entity. Zayin leben is Torah mitzvahs. Is not him and his life, but the life is Torah mitzvahs, which is bedugmas inyan haleda, which is similar to birth. As werden geboren nit zwei Sachen. It's not two items are born. A guf mit a nefesh in them. You have a body, you have a soul in them. Not ein lebendige Sache. There is one living thing. And this idea of that the Torah mitzvahs is not him doing Torah mitzvahs. There is just Torah mitzvahs. Und das ist mudgesh b'lashon Chazal. This is emphasized in the language of the Chazal. Ani loy nivreisi. It says, we're created to serve Hashem, but it says, Ani loy nivreisi. In essence, I have not been created. So in the talking beriya from Metzias Adam, there is no creation. There's no entity of a person. Elo. The only thing is Norvos is Bashafa geworden. What was created is L'Shameshes Koini, to serve Hashem. Sein Mitzias is, was that is Mishameshes Koini. His entity, his existence, what is he? He serves Hashem. Because he needs to be in the loop in order Hashem should be able to fulfill what Hashem wants, that there should be Torah mitzvahs. So he is the vehicle, the conduit through which the Torah mitzvahs are done. In order for it to be accomplished, the will and the wisdom of Hashem, his Torah mitzvahs, darv zayin a'id ba'olam hazeh hagashmi. So there needs to be a physical yid in this world, in the physical world, because all those duchfin should do it. So he's just there as the means to which Hashem will and wisdom should be accomplished. Kommt euch, so it turns out, as is milachatchila nit beschaffen geworden an Nivra. To begin with, there was not created an entity, a metzias b'fnei atzma, independent entity. Nor blois a prat in oifen ki im rotzin Hashem, but there's only a detail in the way to fulfill Hashem's will, there was a creation who's going to accomplish Hashem's will. Through which Hashem's will is accomplished. The Rebbe brings now an example from Halacha that we see that he is not really an entity, but his entire being is for the purpose of his mission. That means that he's not an entity. So, like in Halacha, we find like um, when you carry a keli, there's a shear. You carry the keli, you'd be responsible for Shabbos, Chayiv, and Shabbos. But what happens? You have to carry a shear. A keli has a shear. But what happens if you carry food in a keli? So the keli loses its own entity, and we go by the food. If the food doesn't have a shear, he's going to be exempt, even though the keli has the shear, because the entire purpose of that keli is for what's in him. It's like the entire creation of the person is to bring out the purpose of Hashem, is Hashem will and wisdom, but not that he's an independent. Well, the dugma mahalacha b'poel, to bring a example from an actual halacha. If one would carry out from the Rishus HaYochid into the public less than the amount that obligates you, and if you just carried it by yourself, you wouldn't be chayav, but you put it in a keli. So keli potur avala keli. So you're also going to be exempt, not only because you didn't carry out the food, but also the keli. But how come? The keli has a shear, but he's going to be potur of a keli. Shah keli tfei, because the keli is considered secondary to the food that's carrying the keli. The says, choch as the kli hot ashir, even though that the vessel has the amount that you would be high for. Had you carried it out on its own, you would be responsible for carrying out. Since it became a vessel to the food that's in it, is in it keep so according to the Torah, it's not an entity by itself. It's totally subjugated to the food in there, and the food doesn't have a shear, so it doesn't have its own shear. But it's secondary to the food. And the food is less than the amount needed to be Chaim and Shabbos. Is the Eitzah. So therefore, that carrying out, which would include carrying out the Keli, includes also taking out the Keli, it's not considered to be carrying out. Warum die Baal, das die Kavone von seiner Reistrogen die Kli. Because since his intent, why is he taking out the Keli? Not because he wants the Keli. It is to leave the Eichlin, it's for the food. Is dos the Metzies HaKeli Lamitosi, then that becomes the entity of the Keli, the food that's in it. The Keli wird a tail for the Eichlin. Keli becomes a part of the Eichlin, and the Eichlin doesn't have a shear, and that's why it's butter. So that's the idea that we're saying over here, that your own entity is not considered, because you're here just to do the will of Hashem, and therefore it makes that you're not really an entity. So there's only one thing, there's only Hashem. Now the Rebbe said it has to be, the lesson over here is from the combination between the birthday of the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov together, because as the Rebbe will explain, that energy that permeates the person is not just merely the general chayis, but it's actually very specific. As Chabad, the Alter Rebbe has brought it down into the very details, as opposed to just an amuna in a general way. Dalit. In dem setzt sich euch dem Kesher. In this we also can see, it's visible, the connection, the tie, zwischen dem Yom Haledes from Baal Shem Tov, between the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov, and dem Yom Haledes from Alten Rebbe, and the birthday of the Alter Rebbe. And going back to the idea that born, novelty when you're born, you become your own life. The chidush von anoilad was ervert an nefesh dike metzias. The novelty that someone is born becomes a entity of a nefesh, of a soul, is nit nor mitzad dem klolus inyan hachayis. It's not just because the general life force, nor be iker verbunden mit die protein, but it's mainly tied to the details. Das was an uber is nit kein nefesh. The fact that the fetus is not a soul, only is not a toffel and a prat. He's only secondary in a detail. He's yerech in inside his mother. Zet sich das on beiker. This is mainly noticeable in them as is seine nito di peules von the chushim ve'evorim. That you don't have any activities that the limbs and um, the capabilities, the talents of the person you can't see. But the Gemara Zogdor, as the Gemara over there in Masechta Nida, the Rebbe brought down all the statements before what took place in the mother's womb. So the Gemara says there, what can a fetus be compared to in his mother's womb? Lepinkos mekupol, to a folded pinkos, Roishe bein birkov, and his head is in between his knees, so it's and he eats from his mother, which means he's all folded up. We're not using any of his talents, any of his limbs. Das heißt, as Choj der Uberhod, dem Chituch kol hevorim, even though he has the form, all the limbs of form. He has a roish, a naim, naim, the head, the eyes, the ears. Is roish mekupel umunach ben birkov, but still, his head is folded and lays in between his knees. She'ena v'shamash klum. It doesn't serve anything. She'ena mechashev u'maharer. He doesn't think, and it doesn't reflect. It just doesn't do anything. Has eyes, but he doesn't see. His ears doesn't hear. Chulu, etc. And this is what the novelty, when somebody is born, that he becomes an independent nefesh, not just in the general life force of the body, but it starts now the impact from the child's qualities and his limbs, each one independently. On der Far the Nimshal Zokman, and that's why in the Nimshal we say, as Chei Elul is the Yom HaYemeledes von Shnei HaMoedes HaGedolim. That the Chei Elul is the birthday of the two great luminaries, B'chod HaMachsa, we do it together at once. Val Ki Yadua, as it's known, Bashtei der Chidush von Rabbeinu HaZoken, Mitzayin Teres HaChasidus. What is the novelty of the Alter Rebbe with his teaching of Chasidus, which is Chasidus Chabad, of Teres Chasidus HaKlolis, on the general Chasidus from Baal Shem Tov. In them was der Baal Shem Tov what aufgetan. Baal Shem Tov accomplished a highest kloli in Torah mitzvahs, a general life force in Torah mitzvahs, durch ein Gilui HaNeshama von jeden Eden, by revealing the soul of every Jew. The general, they made a general vitality by revealing the soul of every Yid. Was bechlolus hat sich das ausgedrückt in them. Generally, how did this express itself? In Inyan von Amuna, in the idea of belief. Hagam as der koyach ha'amuna nev durch alle koyches ha'nefesh, even though the power of belief goes through, penetrates all powers of the soul. poilt auf sie in an Öfen von Chayes, it impacts them in a way of vitality, was nimmt sie durch, it penetrates them. Commission Nemar, as the Apostle with Tzadik Bem Nosei Yichya, that with the belief he lives, it brings through, it becomes a Chayes. So here we're saying, restricting the Baal Shem Tov to the level of Emunah, which is a general Chayes, but Emunah impacts all the limbs. That is energizes everything. Is as ober nit machriach, but that doesn't force as der Chayus Emunah nem durch jeden koyach euch in inyon haprotit. That the vitality of the Emunah should go take through to penetrate each power also in its own individual, each in its own detail, in its own aspect. Nor der inyan hakloli von jeden koyach, but only the general idea of every part, the koyach that is connected, was is verbunden mit der nekudas haneshama, amuna von der neshama, which is connected with the point of Muna of the soul. So that chayis that it gives everywhere is in the general chayis of the individual, but not in its own individualized aspect. It doesn't take that through. Uladugma, for example, the Muna can sein nit nor bei Vermakim. The Muna can be not only in a surrounding way. We know that a thief by the entrance is calling Hashem for help because he believes in Hashem, but it's in a surrounding way. So it's possible that it should be in an inner way, that it also takes him through in his actual conduct. Bis as es poilt euch auf sein Riyas Ayin. That Emunah can even impact what his eye sees. As Tvura was mitzad atzvei. That instead of on its own, setzt sich die Welt als Ametzius Gashmius bifnei atzvei. The world appears to be, looks like a physical independent entity, which is in contradiction to spirituality and certainly to godliness. A physical independent entity contradicts spirituality and godliness. So, so then his emuna impacts as zet nit b'riyas ayin loy besori. So then we have his emuna impacts that he sees with his ayin, with his eyes. Veltas sastiret zelikus. He doesn't see world. That is the impact that emuna had. So you don't, when you see, you don't see it in the eyes of flesh. You see the world not contradicting godliness. You don't see it as a Metzias Gashmis. That has been accomplished through Amunah. The Amunah poiled over it, however, that Amunah does not impact as a Zozen, them Koyach HaPoil Benifel, that he should see the power of the Poil and the Nifel. It may not be a contradiction, but he doesn't see the work of the impactor in the impacted. He doesn't see that it impacted. Al derech wieder chayus kloli. Those was der Mensch leapt similar to the general vitality that a person is alive. Thus nemt durch alle ivorim. That also encompasses all limbs. Und das wird vereinzigt mit sie, and that becomes that life force with them. Das ist aber nicht verbunden mit einem Inyan Proti von jedem Eber, but it's not associated, tied with the specific idea of every limb, nor mit der Nekuda Klolis von alle Ivorim, but with the central, general point of all limbs as ein Natel von Gufod, they're part of the human nature. So the Chayis, while it impacts the details, but it doesn't impact the details as it is on its own, but just as it is part of the general Chayis of the body of the person. That was the accomplishment of the Baal Shem Tov. The Alte Rebbe hat aber Mamsher given a Chayis in jeden Koyach von der Neshama. He brought down a life, vitality in every power of the soul. Und in jeder Avoide in Torah Mitzvahs and in every service of Torah Mitzvahs. Euch mitzad dem Teuchen Proti von dem Koyach. Also from the prospect of the individual contents of that koyach. Al derech vider chayis proti. This would be similar physically to the specific vitality versus ausgemosten linia proti from every neighbor, which is measured according to the specific idea of every limb. As the amuna kumtarop unem durch euch seichel odom, that amuna comes down and it penetrates is also the logic of the person, bis sein Seichel Gufe versteht und is machrech elokus, that his Seichel himself understands and forces out that there is need godliness. Bis jeder Prat von dem Id is geworden an Nefesh Diker Mitzad Inyone. Each detail of the Yid became a soul from its own inyan, not because of the general life. Beginning with the level of Chochmah, Bina, Das, and Soul. Der Gilui Alakus B'Seichel, the revelation of godliness in his intellect is beoifenes in a way as in im der Hert, that it's sensed in the Seichel as Kol Mitzi Usei is auf zu verstehen Alakus, is just so we can understand godliness. Und von die Meuchen kommen die Midas and from these moichin that have the sense that they're entirely there to understand godliness. That's what here you get the midas based on the moichin. As is nirgesh, it's felt as kol mitziusa from midas ha'ava, that the entire existence, why is there a trait, a characteristic of love is that it should be Avas Hashem. Weil derech ze midas hayira, ushar midas, similar in the middle of yira and other midas. Und demult is jeder koyach mitzad in yonei, then each koyach from its own aspect are nefesh diker. Sein Leben is alakus, his life is godliness. Wow. I mean, this is like a heavy duty Hasidus explanation of what the Alter Rebbe has accomplished, a novel even over what the Alter Rebbe to make every prat alive, every detail alive, not just the general life. And what alive means, that the Rebbe explains that its whole purpose is only for Hashem from their perspective, from the detailed, from the individualized, from this specific. And that was accomplished by the Alter Rebbe. On the Rebbe, the Rebbe gesagt, and therefore the Rebbe Shmosig, the Rebbe Rashab said, Heint is der Yom HaLedes from unsere Shnei HaMeides HaGedolim. Today is the birthday from our two great luminaries, and he said it b'chod ha'machta, he said it together. Und der noch mefarish gewesen einen b'fnei atzmei. Then later on he just said, Baal Shem Tov, the Alter Rebbe. Weil der Yom HaLedes wer is negeya zu jedem einem be'ofen goli. Because the idea of a birthday, as it touches and it's important to everyone in open way, bis azer zol be'amitus, bis zokt be'amitus gut yontiv, he says truthfully, good yontiv to Eden, is b'shas is da der gilu and pula from Teiras Chassidus Haklolish from Baal Shem Tov, when there is the revelation and the impact of the general Chassidus the Baal Shem Tov, durch und zusammen, through and together mit Teiras Chassidus Chabad al der Rabbi Nazoken, together and through Chassidus Chabad with Alter Rebbe. Well, demos tut sich auf, because then you accomplish as Aid Verta vollständige Nefesh Metzias, that it becomes a complete entity of Nefesh at that point, like the birth, and Vitala Protim also in all detail. So that's Dafke with the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe together, brought down together. And Ois Hey, the Rebbe will continue now. This whole idea of that of the Chiddush of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, the idea of birth, the idea of a loda from a fetus to a birth, a mitzias, b'fnei atzmai. This is tied to the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov on a spiritual level. This is way after the passing of the Baal Shem Tov in the year Tov Reish Nun Beis. The Rebbe Rashab heard a teaching, and that teaching of the Baal Shem Tov is associated with this idea. Hey, Yeder Inyan Shenizgala Al Yidei Tzadikim, every idea that has been revealed through the righteous, Verdos Gizokt L'Choderesh B'Terosim. So first and foremost, that is said in their teaching, in the teaching that they taught. Is euch der Inyan Hanal in der Sheiches from the Baal Shem Tov mit Alten Rebbe. So also in the above matter, the connection of the Baal Shem Tov with the Alter Rebbe, zet sich begilui behadgoshe, we see it openly and with emphasis in the Torah was the Baal Shem Tov had gesagt, in the teaching, the Torah that the Baal Shem Tov said, b'Shabbos Parshas Kitovoi, and the Shabbos Parshas Kisovoi, in Chei Elul, in the Shnas, Bishnas Tov Reish Nun Beis, in the year Tov Reish Nun Beis. With the Rebbe, the Tzel. So the Baal Shem Tov gave a Torah at that time in the 7 visions that the Rebbe Rashab saw, and one of them, these were the different Torahs that the Baal Shem Tov shared. With the Rebbe, the Shver der Zelt, as my father-in-law, the Rebbe related wegen sein Vater about his father, the Rebbe Nishmos Eden. We had geherd the Zayin Torahs that he heard, the 7 teachings, the 7 Torahs. But the Baal Shem Tov had gesagt, Yenem Chayel in Gan Eden. The Baal Shem Tov said it on that Chayel in Gan Eden, and he gave it over. The Erste Torah, the first Torah, the Baal Shem Tov gesagt, Achar Kabbalah Shabbos. He said it after Kabbalah Shabbos. From Posik on the verse, V'hoyo kisovaya la'oretz gomer. Posik says, when you come to the land, upirish, but he explained the word oretz, eretz loshem merutza, that you come to the merutza running. Ki b'tevas eretz yesh beis pirushim. And the word eretz, we have 2 interpretation. Loshen merutza, lama nikra shma eretz. So one of them is called, because it's called eretz sherotzu solasis rutzein koina. She wanted, it's a loshen rotzen, that it wanted to do the will of Hashem. That's one. But also the eretz loshen merutza. Eretz also comes in loshen of running. So he types it like the eretz that it's loshen merutza. So kisavoyu al haaretz, when you come to a running a merutza, kisavoyu al haaretz, kisavoyu al haaretz. This is where the Baal Shem Tov types. In that Torah that he gave the Baal Shem Tov after Kabbalah Shabbos in Gan Eden in the year Tov Reish Nun Beis. So he said that as du wirst zukommen zu dem Rotzen und Merutza, when you reach to the level of want. So we have both the rotzin and running. Asher Hashem elikecha neisen l'chanachlo. V'yirishto. God gives it to you as an inheritance. But this is amatone milmailo v'yirusha b'kol echad miYisrael. This is a gift from above inheritance by every single Jew. There sein the Aveda in them. So what needs to do? So when you come to that level, you're running and you have a want and a desire and running for Hashem. And that's Hashem gives it to you, that you should want to run and do that. That's a matanim ma'ilon. Shem Elokecha neisel lecha nachlo. V'yidishta, this is an inheritance. B'chol echad mi'Yisrael, every year. There sein the Aveda in them. There needs to be the service v'yoshavta bo. You have to settle down in it. Also, Zain b'hisyashvus. You need to, instead of just the run, you settle it down. This needs to be settled. You take it and you put it in a basket. Malbish Zain the Eiris in Kalim, that you should dress up these lights in vessels. And then further, the Pasuk says, you go to the place where Inyan Hashgacha Pratis. That's the idea of divine providence. Asher yivchar Hashem elikecha. If you go to a place that is which Hashem has chosen, as Ayid geht in an ort, when Ayid goes in a place, is das nicht was geht. It's not that he's going there. No, mefirtam, he's being led. The Hashgacha Elyonet, the supreme supervision, is as kommt in an ort. So when you come in a place, is the kaboneh. To publicize godliness in the world. This was the teaching that the Baal Shem Tov said on that Chayel Tov version base. Bald as the Torah is gesagt worden, Idea Baal Shem Tov b'yom Chaim Elul, since this teaching was said by the Baal Shem Tov on the day of Chayel, und das ist gehört geworden, and this was heard Idea Nisiyah Chabad, through Liddus Chabad, is move on. It's understood as in them is mudgesh the nekuda and chidush from them talk from Chei Elul. That here it's emphasized the point and the novelty of the day of Chei Elul. In Yoneh from Baal Shem Tov and the Malton Rebbe, which is the idea of the Baal Shem Tov and Alter Rebbe. So that was presented in that Torah that he gave on Chei Elul, and it's emphasized the novelty of Chei Elul as the day of the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov. So we can say possibly that those are zwei Yonim was der Baal Shem Tov sagt. These are two aspects that the Baal Shem Tov says. Aleph, the first thing that he's saying is V'hoyo kisovela oretz du wirst zukommen zu dem Rotzen und Merutza, that you are going to reach to that wish, that desire, and that running. Asher Hashem and Hashem that Hashem gives you from above, gives you an inheritance which is a gift from above as an inheritance. Thus, that first sentence is Bechlolus the Gilu from Teres Chassidus HaKlolus. Generally speaking, this is the revelation of the general Chassidus. Was the Baal Shem Tov Giton that was accomplished by the Baal Shem Tov. Gilui Rotzin Atzmi Shebenef Shomo was his Farabeyadriden, to reveal the inherent, the essence of the Rotzin that's in the Neshama that every Yid has for Hashem. That was accomplished by the Baal Shem Tov to reveal that Rotzin Atzmi. And then based on the Avodah was darf in them Zayin, but then the avodah that he continues that you need to do by this, be your shafta boy, settle it, those will zayin be yashvus, be settled. Lakachto go be besanta baten, you should take it and put it in the basket. Malbi zayin the eris in kalim, to dress the light into kalim, is inyan Chassidus Chabad. That's the second part, that's the idea of Chassidus Chabad. As the rotzen and merutza from the neshama, that this desire and the running of the neshama, trokman arabi proteus, that you bring it down specifics, Oiris bekalim, the vessels, lights in the vessels. Those vert, that head, this becomes, this is sensed, when I've get accomplished, jeden koyach prodi from them odom ukenal, by every detail, power of the person, I said earlier, which was the novelty and the chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. When it them is that the Baal Shem Tov Madgish, And the Hashem emphasizes over here, the Zayin Nitkin Tzvei Avedus Vinyonim. These are not two separate services and ideas. Du sollst zukommen zum Rotzum Merotzachulu. You should reach the level of Rotzum Merotzach und a zweite Sache, something else, as darf sein, the Aveda, Zarobtragen das bis Yashus, the Aveda needs to be to bring it down to settle. But das ist gesagt geworden als ein Inyan, it was said as one matter. As du wirst zukommen, that you will reach, das heißt, as bei dir ist geworden die Leder, that once by you was the birth, es hat sich in dein Metzies Gufe angehört, that your existence you can sense und ist gale geworden, the matone milmailo, the gift from above, Berushim Kolechad Me Yisrael, which everybody has inherited, the rotzun and merutzu shal neshama, the desire and the running of the neshama, darf sein in der Aveda in them, the service in them needs to be malbish sein the oiris in Kalim, to dress them up in the Kalim. As a Rav come in Chabad, that it should come down in Chabad. So it's one, like the birthday of them both together, that this Merutza should come down the Kalim in Chabad, through Chabad and all of the powers of the soul. Und damit is the Shleimus later, and then it's the wholesome later. Both. Now the Rebbe is going to explain it. Seemingly, the second part in the teaching about Tashgocha Pratis doesn't seem to have a connection to the first part. But now, based on the Rebbe's explanation, we'll understand the continuation. But based on this, we can explain the continuation, the teaching. Who inyan hashgocha prot is going to the place is divine providence. As er kommt in an Ort, when you come to a place, is the kavona l'shaken shmeishom. The intent is to make Hashem's name rest there, l'farsim elakus be'olam, to publicize godliness in the world. That it means that Sher Hashem lekecha, the Eibishter leads you there. V'alachta lamokim. Hashem leads you there. The Shakin Shmeishom, to be able to publicize Hashem's name. The Lechera, it would seem that Enoch and Ami, while it's true that this whole concept this is also tied to the basis of the view of the Baal Shem Tov. The inyan von Hashgacha Pratis, the idea of divine providence, umefarsim zayin elukus, void kumt, and to spread godliness wherever it comes. Was is over der kesher mit ascholos haTorah? But what's the tie, the connection with the beginning of the Torah? That it says that Malbir zayin the eris in Kalim, to put in the lights into the Kalim. What is that connection? So the Rebbe says in that Shima, in this write-up, wer erzählt wegen der zweiter Teure, over there he relates about the second teaching, was is given Achar Tfilas Arvis. The first one was for Kabbalah Shabbos, said before. This was after Ma'ariv. As Omar Eid Hapam HaTorah Kedemes, he said the previous Torah, V'hois v'ne'ered, V'hoya Kisove, B'chdei aufzukommen zu dem Rotzen, was ist b'matone bei jedem. In order to be able to reach that Rotzen that everybody has, a gift, a Yerusha, it's a gift by each one, Hu al yidei l'shakin shmei shom, that is through making Hashem's name rest there. To give your soul away, to sacrifice, to publicize godliness in the world. Was is there mysterious nefesh in them? Mitabrocha uposuk tilim. What is the mysterious nefesh that you are publicizing? A blessing and a pasuk tilim. That's the end of the teaching. So maybe one can say, well, that the connection is because L'shakin Shmei Shom brings you to the V'hoya Kisove, that you get that Rotz. Das aber nicht maßbid levayer the Sheiches von die zwei Inyonim in the Torah HaAleph. This is not sufficient to explain the two ideas of the Rotzin and the Tena that you put it in Kalim and the idea of Hashgacha Protis and the Farsim Shmoy, which is in the first Torah of Vorum from Hemshech Haloshin Omar Eda Pama Torah Kademes V'Hoisif. Fact that he says is the previous Torah, and then he added is Mashma de Sofa B'Torah Shnia, that the additional in the second teaching is an Inya V'Torah B'Fnei Atzmei. It's its own individual teaching, a high sofa, it's an addition. Nicht nur a hesber of their Torah Rishon. It's not just a explaining the first teaching. So this has to be, so the first Torah has to be understood without this additional explanation. Al Pizeh, based on the second Torah, is Blois Muvet as the Shaykhs, we all understand the connection from the Shak and Shmei Shom, to self-sacrifice, to publicize godliness in the world, with the idea, the rotzin, was is b'matona b'yederen, was is klolus achidish from Teres Baal Shem Tov, that we understand now that this rotzin that everybody has, which is every Yid gets a matone from Hashem Elikecho, this is the general novelty of the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. But nicht mit dem Iker Prat in der erster Torah, but that's not with the main point in the first Torah. Over there, he mentions also that this is an inheritance. But what is the main point? That in of us you have to be settled, lokachto, besamto batena, should take it, put it in the basket, malbish sein the iris in kalim, to fit the iris in the kalim. The inyan from Arab Trogen in Protim Chabad, the idea to bring it down into details of Chabad. So the Rebbe says, "V'yeshleimer der biur bazeh." We can say the explanation, and the Rebbe wants to base this to explain this Torah, how these two things of settling down the oiras, the merutza, and the idea of hashgacha pratis to be mefarsim when you come there. What's the connection? The chilek zwischen an ubar und an neulad. The difference between a fetus and one who's born, nit nor in mitzius legabe atzvei, not only as his existence for himself, nor euch ubi iker klape azulis, but it's also and mainly towards somebody outside. As an uber seine in yonovu peulos loisel atzvei. An uber, his matters, his activities are for himself. They have no connection or influence to the world of the outside. As opposed to when the child is born, is yeder pu'ula b'metzias oichutz mimenu. So every act that takes place that exists also outside of him. Starting with the first instant that he was born, his yell is listened to on the outside. And his effects with his hands and his feet, is seen and felt by others. And therefore is als Hemshech to the later von Aiden, as a follow-up, as a continuation to the birth of a Yid, does v'zayin Torah mitzvahs and zayin chayis v'nefesh. The fact that his Torah mitzvahs and his vitality and his soul, the rotzen and berutzah are nefesh, the desire and the running of the soul, kum tarab bizin oirisun kelim, that it comes down into the light in kelim, bringt us the memeila oich der pirsum alakus, so there automatically, since it connects to the kelim, it publicizes godliness. as vu kommt, wherever he comes, der hert as the kavonis if mefarsen sein alakus be'olam. That what is the intent is to publicize godliness in the world. So that follows the life force of the child when he's born, that it's not only that he becomes an entity by himself, but it's a entity that impacts the outside, so that when there is the level of birth and it impacts, it brings the publicizing of godliness in the world. The Tamder from Beruchnis, the reason spiritually why is that der Chiluk von einer Sach, was wird belebt von einer zweiter Sach, und Achayis Atzmi is, what's the difference between something which becomes alive from something else, or something which is its own vitality is, a Sach was wird belebt von einer zweiten, something which gets its life from somebody else, kann nicht Mechaye sein anderer. The fetus it doesn't have his own chayis, it's somebody else's chayis. It cannot give chayis to others if he gets it. It doesn't have his own chayis. Dafke chay be'etzem, only somebody who's in essence chay can from him sein chayis lachis. He can have the vitality to vitalize others. Es kommt zu a zweite Sach, when something else comes, nimmt es durch und macht das Leben. He penetrates it and he makes it alive. Und wie bald as Elokus v'Torah mitzvahs is a chayis atzmi, since godliness is its own chayis, is b'shas das werde mitzias von Ayiden. When that becomes the entity of the Yid begets that chayis. Das is ein nefesh. B'meila, therefore, vu Ayid gate, wherever a Yid goes, poil terus and is mefarsim alakus ba'olam. He impacts and he reveals godliness in the world. Zion. Afal pias the linya from Kirsim alakus ba'olam. Even though spreading alakus ba'olam, it's changayim durchim Baal Shem Tov. It started through the Baal Shem Tov, noch eider dem Gilu Teres Chassidus Chabad durch dem Alten Rebbe, before the revelation of Chassidus Chabad of the Alten Rebbe. Kommt zu in dem Pirsum Alakus, but then it's added to this publicizing of godliness, Vidos is la'achre Gilu Teres Chabad, which comes after the revelation of the teaching of Chabad. As the Eidos come up in Kalim, the Eidos come down in the Kalim. So publicizing in of itself started with the Baal Shem Tov, but there is a whole nother level that comes to the publicizing after the Alter Rebbe, when the Eidos are brought down in the Kalim. That's what it was. Explanation of this. That Oiftu from the Alten Rebbe, Miteres Chassidus Chabad, the novelty of the Alter Rebbe with the teaching of Chabad Chassidus, is nicht nur mitzad dem Ausgeteiltkeit von Chabad shel ha'odam. It's not only because the separation of the Chochmah Binah, the person, von andere Koichles HaNefesh, from the other powers of the soul. Und der Fahr is Negeya as Teres HaChasidus Elokus, and that's why it's important that Teres HaChasidus, godliness of the Herd werden euch in Sichle shel ha'odam, that it should be also in the intellect of the person because of the distinction of the Chabad. Nor, the reason is, what the Alter Rebbe wanted is, the Kavoni is lasis lo yizborich dira b'tachtonim, to make for him blessed a dwelling place in the world below. As older herd werden as ein oid milvade, that it should be sensed that there is nothing besides Hashem. In Mitzias Olam, in the existence of the world, or Mitzad Olam, and from the perspective of the world. Vibald as Hascholas HaMitzias. And since what is the beginning of the Mitzias, was is Nivdal Kaviyochel, von Elokus is Seichel, which is separate from godliness, is Seichel, is l'choil l'roish negeya to masbe zayin hanal nesechel. So first and foremost, it's important to explain the above logically. Business seichel anushi till in the human intellect. It's not only because we want Chabad, because Chabad is great, that's separate distinction. No, but because we want to make a diribet achtoinim, and the first entity in the first achtoinim is seichel. So we have to explain it into seichel. Und durch dem, was euch seichel hodem der Herd, and through the fact that the intellect of the person senses on erkennt Achdus Havaya now, recognizes the above unity of Hashem, bis beoifen as es wird kol mitziusif of dem seichel, to the extent that this becomes the entire entity of the seichel to verstehen the lakus, to understand godliness. Kum das herab in vashe veisel v'vechel. So then it comes down into your heart in midas habelev. Was the pool of Shleimus in midas habelev, the impact completely, wholesomely in the mid measures, in the emotion, the character traits of the heart is when when it comes through the human intellect. The Rambam Pascha does halacha, as the Rambam rules so halacha. That how could you reach Hashem's love and fear through reflection, through Yizboinen? That means that the complete comes through Seichel. The Vashavesel of Avecho through V'yedata Hashem. By the in the Koichas Atachtoinim, and through the heart, then it goes down to the lower power. Bizas Dver der Herd Achdus Havaya, until you sense the unity of Hashem in der ganzen Welt, in the whole world of Bechol in Yonei Ha'olam, in all matters of the world. The Liber Zetman, and therefore we see as wieder Inyan from the Farsim Alakus Ba'olam, that this to publicize godliness in the world kumt als hemshach and aprat, it comes as a follow-up, a follow and a detail in the Oiftum of Chabad, in the accounts of Chabad. In Teres Achsidus Klolis, V'lotach Kachto Goymer V'samto Batena. Over there, take it and put it in the basket. Malber Zayin Deris in Kelim, to put the lights in the Kelim. Kumtsu in them achidush. So then, now there's a novelty in the accompaniment of Chabad, the teaching of Chabad. In addition to this, was men zet men ados zarotz in numurutza from etzem hanefesh. When do you see that this is a desire and war from the essence of the soul? Was kumt up in Chabad, that comes down in Chabad nicht an Inyan was is verbunden mit sein Metzius Vetainig, is not something which is tied to his being and his pleasure. Davke v'mizet, it's only when you see that the mensch verbeugt of der Avodah mit sich, that the mensch bends on his service with himself. Sein haskoli in elokus, his understanding godliness. Avedosi ba'avira, his level and gate mefarsim zayin elakus ba'elam shechutz imenu, and he goes to publicize godliness in the world which is outside of him. So then, when is it visible that it's from the etzem hanefesh? Is when he leaves it and he bends and he goes out to publicize godliness. Is everyone negated Aveda Guda? So that's something which there's something about the work itself. Shame visis negeya, as the pirsum elukus mitzad odom. Zol getom ven mechol koiches nafshe. Just as it's important that the publicizing of godliness from the person's perspective should be done with all of his power of his soul. As on mefarsim zayin elukus bavon vasoga. He should publicize godliness with understanding and grasp of so ushar koiches nafshe, through his character traits and the rest of the power of the soul, bis till up till his action, leg and tefillah mitayidin, to put on tefillin, or the Yid unclap on a mezuzah Pesach basically to bang up a mezuzah on the entrance of his home, while there's a b'shar mitzvahs, and similar to other mitzvahs. So you need the avodah to be done in all details, from the emotion, from the intellect to the action, actually doing the thing. When al derech zeh the geya oistlitz yed the mittel v'oifen, and also similarly, it's important to utilize every means and every way if mefarsim zayin elokus to publicize godliness like the matzav am yuchad shebachol zman and b'chol mokom, according to the special condition that's in every place and every time. But durch them is b'mevarer umala. That way you sort out and you elevate oich the machshir v'inyan mesuyim. Also that prepare that special matter that allows you to do it. In Welt Lavedosis Baruch, you utilize it to the service of Hashem. Because yeder machshir v'dover ba'olam, because each item in the world and every created everything that does work, whatever it does, is lebora lekvoide. So that's a godly. So you utilize it. You utilize every available means and all the different to the disposal in order to publicize godliness. Is moving. Is echt moving. Based on that, we also understand was the Torah of Hashem Tov Anal is nisgal geworden. The teaching of Hashem Tov above was revealed through Chei through my father-in-law, the Rebbe. And my father-in-law, you saw actually that the divine providence led him every place the farsim alakus ba'elam, to publicize godliness in the world, kipshute in the ganze Welt. Especially through his shluchim in all corners of the world. And that publicity was in all ways, all means. Whether it's through revealing the deepest matters in the Hasidic teaching, and also by publicizing Torah matters, Niglo Chassidus, in verschiedene Sprachen, Niglo Chassidus in various languages, till very low, even children that have been in captivity, been not educated at all, till impact na Yid, to eat in Shabbos, to keep Shabbos, Taras HaMishpacha, family purity, leg and tefillin, put on tefillin kiyotzvah. Was durch them poiled men of them Eden, that way by impacting that was the Friedrich Rebbe doing all these things. You accomplished by the Eden, Ani hayom levideticha. I've been born, give you birth today. I've been geboren al Seid. He's born as a Jew, a lebendiger nefesh, a living soul. As ein ganze Metziah is Teure Niederschkeit. Dass his entire being is Teure Niederschkeit. Das ist noch mehr memaher die Gebulos bepoil b'meir v'yameinu. This hastens the redemption actually quickly nowadays durch Mashiach Tzidkenu, through the righteous Mashiach, then as ved time begilui, when it will be open, later Sam Yisrael, the birth of the Jewish people, Cholog al Yolda Tzin as Boneho, that Tzin have given birth to the children, in our day. This is Mesichas Chayel Tovshim Amaluf and Tovshim Beis. A lot of powerful and deep ideas, and many of them, and it's also a long sikha. So this is the first round, and we have to do it over again and reflect on the various different aspects of the sikha.